Okay, welcome back. It's been a while trying to heal up from the knee surgery and all, but I'm ready to get back to work now, so let's get to it. So when we left off, we were riveting in the panels, the aluminum inside the body of the car. We left off with a panel located down here. I'll show you that in just a minute. And what I did on each one, if you look at the last video, I showed you how I drilled it. I showed you how I put the silicone on. I showed you how to rivet it together. So for the rest of this, I'm not going to waste your time doing that. I'm just going to show you what order I put the pieces in, and then if I had to tweak anything or ran into any problems. So that's what we're going to do. Let's get to it. Okay, so this was the last piece we put in on the last video. That's what you saw. And then the next piece I wanted to put in was this side piece here. And I did run into one thing where I kind of had to struggle with it a little bit until I figured out exactly what the right way to do things was. If you look closely, this panel here goes underneath this here. It slides underneath. I tried doing it on top and it just didn't line up right. So this little piece here slides underneath. See how I have the cleco on this piece here holding it in place? So that was one of the little hiccups I found. And we're going to go ahead and install the main floor panel. Followed by the little side piece that goes right here. The side piece that goes here. And then we'll also put the other little shoulder piece in there. So I'm going to go ahead and get all that installed. We're going to silicone, cleco, and rivet just like we have done on all the other pieces. And I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Okay, you can see we've got the floorboards in here. That all went really well. We got the shoulder in here. Remember, this seam here gets tucked underneath this plate here. Also on the front here, where this attaches here, when I did the other side, I lined it all up and drilled the holes first. And I had a hard time getting everything to line up. This time what I did was I got everything mounted and riveted, and then I drilled and riveted these holes here, and I thought that went a lot easier. Installed the front panel here, which you can see on the other side there. And of course, across the top, we have silicone under here, but no rivets. And the clamps are in place there to help that get a good bite. This is going to give you a little better picture of that panel we installed on the backside there. I got my friend Mr. Winters here to help me. Mr. Winters, if you could just show him where we installed this panel right here. Just point to that right down there. Right here. Yep. And if you notice right where he's pointing now at the end there, notice how there's no rivets? That's because the next piece that goes in actually slides behind that. So it just kind of tucks in underneath there. There you go, from the top, just like that. So the next thing we're going to do on both sides is we're going to drill, silicone, and rivet, and those will be ready to go. A couple things I want to tell you about this piece we're installing right now and just general overall the practices I'm using putting this together. Someone pointed out in the comments that they noticed that my rivet spacing is the same all the way around. Now, the book calls for 3-inch spacing if it's going to metal and 2-inch spacing if it's aluminum on aluminum. I just went with 2-inch spacing all the way across. Rivets are cheap. Takes away the mental math and gives it probably a little more support. I don't know. Can't hurt. A little more work, but I'm good for it. Other thing. When this slips in here, and I'll show you a close-up, a good picture of this. This bottom tab down here is kind of bent outward so that when you put this in place properly, it leaves a gap. It's not flush against the part we're going to rivet it to, okay? So it's very important as you go through and you fit everything together. If these little tabs aren't bent right, if they're not flush against the surface you're riveting, go ahead and get yourself some good aviation benders and use a pair of pliers and a couple pieces of paint stick if you want. And you just get in here and we've gone through and we've straightened this up just a little bit. So now when I put this in, it's going to slip behind here like we said. Slide down in there. Now, this fits flush in the back. That allows you to get a good riveting surface. The other thing is, see where it overlaps right here? So normally, you know, we're going to run silicone along all the open exposed edges here, but this is sandwiched in here. So what I did on this is on this portion here that's going to be sandwiched in, I just took some silicone in my hands and I just put in my fingers and I just put a thin stripe of silicone coating both sides of the metal so that when I put it in here, you know, it would give that sound dampening and vibration dampening that we're looking for. All right, you can see you've got the shoulder nicely installed here, ready to move on to the next step. But before we move on, I want to point out one thing about using pop rivets. If you don't use a lot of these, one of the things you need to look out for is if a rivet is in cockeyed or it doesn't seat all the way. If you can get your fingernail underneath the edge of the rivet, or if it just looks like it's not laying flat, drill the rivet out and put a new one in. Don't leave these sloppy rivets in there because they're really not holding anything. And they could become a problem down the road. Also, when you go to lay carpet or whatever over, they're going to be sticking up more than all the other ones. So if your rivets aren't correct, drill them out, put them in correctly. Next piece to go in is going to be the inner driver side foot box. If you can see on the front here, this tucks underneath in the front. And then on the back, where it hooks in the cockpit area, it goes over the top of everything. I'm going to point something out to you here. If you can see this little light area right here, this is actually just a little bead of silicone. This panel that I just installed here is actually a two-piece unit. And I elected to put it together as one piece and then try to mount it to here. And when I installed it in here, I had a little bit of a gap there. And I'm wondering if maybe if I had installed it one piece at a time, if I could have avoided that. So that's something to think about when you go to put these two pieces together. Good luck. Okay, the last piece I'm going to put on for now is the outer foot box right here. Same thing. We've already got the holes drilled. We're going to silicone it, rivet it, and button it up. All of the flanges go to the inside. Make it look good. We're not going to put the top on because the next thing we're going to do is the fuel tank. And after we do the fuel tank, we're going to run the fuel lines and we're going to start running brake lines. So I want to make sure I have good access to everything in here. So we'll mess with the top part later. And there she is, all buttoned up. All right, finally we get to open some new boxes and play with some new toys. We're going to start putting the fuel tank together and begin working on the fuel system. However, I'm going to make some changes to the way the book says to do it. Let's start off with fuel pumps. So the fuel pump that comes with the aircraft, with the car, is made by TI Aeromotive. What everyone is running in our cars are the Walbro pumps, which coincidentally is also made by TA Aeromotive with a different part number. This, if you look on different rating guides, is rated about a 4 or 4.5. This, the one that comes with the kit, is rated on a 2, which coincides with what you see on the forums where a lot of people say, you know, they last for a couple of years and then they crap out on you. So we spent the extra $100 and we went and got the Walbro pump. I'll have links to all these pieces, parts we're talking down at the bottom of the screen. Next thing is it comes with the holders for the fuel pump, or if you're going to do carburetors, comes with the standard setup to get your fuel out of the tank. This is the one that comes with the kit. This is an aftermarket one that comes from Quantum Fuel Systems. The primary differences between the two are, first of all, this is a lot more heavily constructed than the one that comes from Factory 5. It's not like these things are going to get beat up anyway, so that's not terribly important. But what is kind of cool is I'm going to do soft lines with AN6 fittings the whole way. This already has the AN6 fittings on it. And the return for the fuel empties down at the bottom of the tank, whereas on the Factory 5 version, it comes out up here, which can lead to foaming in the tank as it sprays the excess fuel on top of the fuel that's already in the tank. So we're going to go ahead and replace these two items. The last thing we're going to swap out, as far as hard parts, is the fuel filter. This is a Russell fuel filter that has AN6 fittings on each side, so my installation stays clean. Not going to say it works any better than a stock one. It probably doesn't, but it goes together with everything pieces parts wise that I'm putting on it. So we're going to go with this little Russell in line. And speaking of lines, I've elected to not go with the hard lines, but go with the braided soft lines, which are the CPE fuel resistant lines that are also good for methanol. Very important that you double check that your fuel lines will tolerate methanol. Otherwise, you're going to have problems down the road. There's a kit you can get at Amazon from Evil Energy. It's got 20 feet of line in it and a handful of adapters and all that other stuff to put this system together. When I did the mental math of what adapters I was going to need to put everything together the way I wanted, the only thing not in this kit was one extra AN6 fitting straight on. Once I had that, everything in the kit will give me everything I need. What this is going to do for me is I can run, I'm going to run AN6 or 3/8 to and from, both on the return and on the delivery side. Spoke to a couple of hot rod guys, and they said that's probably a good idea for the type of setup we have. So that's what's going to happen. All right, got all my parts laid out. I've inventoried everything, and Gary and I are ready to get going on putting this thing together. As luck would have it, my microphone took a dump, so I'm just going to voice over the rest of this. What Gary's doing now is put in the little plastic caps on the base of the chassis where the tank will make contact. All you have to do is just tap them in with a hammer, and you're ready for the next step. Okay, you got the straps that go underneath the car to support the tank, but the little opening where the bolts go through isn't quite big enough. So we had to take a 3-inch tap and, a 3-inch chisel and punch it through to get the hole large enough to accept the bolt. All right, once we've got the openings widened up on that strap, Gary's going to go ahead and secure those to the chassis using the 3/8-inch bolts provided in the kit. The longer strap goes on the passenger side, the shorter one on the driver's side. We're just going to install these loosely for now. Next thing I'm going to do is take the vent with the integrated rollover protection and screw it into the little plastic assembly that is used to affix it to the tank. Just go ahead and crank that in there till it's snug. Remember, it's plastic, so don't get too carried away. And there you have it. That's what it looks like when it's complete, ready to go in the tank. All right, what you see going on here is I'm going to take the little rubber grommet and install that into the tank, and that's going to support the vent that we assembled just a moment ago. It's a little bit tricky, but just go ahead and get that thing stuffed down in there, and then you just use your man strength and hut that part down inside that hole there. Putting a little spittle on the edge of it will certainly help you out. And there you have it. All right, now we're going to go ahead and get the fuel pump assembly all put together. First thing we're going to do is you grab one of the little clamps and you slide that clamp in place, and then you take and put a little spittle on the nipple there. We all like to do that. And just slide the fuel pump onto the hose and then adjust that clamp. The thing you have to be careful of is as you set that up, take notice of where the plug is and how those wires are going to get down from where they attach at the top and plug in on the top of the mechanism itself there. The other thing, and you can barely see it under my hand there, it looks kind of gray. There's actually a foam wrap that you put around the outside of the assembly, which not only helps hold it in place, it reduces vibration, it also goes a long way to reduce the noise of the pump itself. All right, so there's the completed assembly. You notice I've got the wires routed out of the way of everything. The cannon plug is plugged in on the top of the pump. And I made sure that the little pipe there hasn't been damaged. And the last thing that will happen is we'll put a little sock on the end of it on that little white cap. And that's the last thing that happens before we go ahead and put it inside the tank. Okay, you can see the whole assembly there with the little white filter on the end. If you notice there's a hose clamp down there, the filter there, that's because at this point I had not yet received that black foam sleeve that I just showed you a second ago. So this is really just a test fit, but it'll show how it all goes together. So basically you just kind of stuff the filter down in the hole, and then you twist and turn using the little notches in the side of the hole to help the assembly slip down in there. Now remember, you laid your O-ring over the top before you started this. That way, once you eventually do figure out how to get it down in the hole, you're ready to go ahead and put the little silver ring on and tighten it up. Now, as you can see here, I had to play around with it a little bit to find out where it was happy. It fits down into a little pan down into the base of the tank, and the direction you have your fuel filter pointed in is going to determine which way your fittings are going to face once it's in place. So you can see after I struggle it for a little while, I eventually get it tucked down inside there. Okay, and now I'm going to take my little metal ring, make sure that I've got my rubber gasket installed properly, then put the ring on top and secure it in place. You do it just like you chose in the book. Give it a little tap with a hammer, and you're good to go. Okay, next it's the fuel sender. Same thing. Start with your O-ring, then ease the apparatus down into the hole carefully. And once you get it down in there, you line up the little tabs on the side so that it holds itself in place. And there you go. Come on, you can do it. Maybe. Ah, he's got it. Okay, and then the little metal ring goes on top. And same thing as before. We're going to hand tighten it just a little bit, and then we'll tap it in place with a hammer and call it good. All right, next thing is the fuel filler neck. You got to start by getting that rubber grommet in there. It's a bit of a bear to get in, but just stick with it. You'll get it popped in there. And then once you get that in, you're going to slide the tube in that hole up to the little ring that's on the tube. You can see it. Well, you'll see it here when it hits the stop. Okay, yeah, you can see I put a little WD-40 on there. And yeah, soapy water would have been better. Here's a great view of my back as I try to push this thing in. It did take quite a bit of oomph to get it in there. But once it's secured, you can position it where it needs to be, and the next thing you're going to do is go ahead and install the collar. All right, the collar just slides on over the pipe, and then it bolts on to the lip of the gas tank. Now, in the book, it says we got to drill a hole there and put in a sheet metal screw, but there's already a hole drilled on my tank, so I'm going to just be using a bolt. The angle of that, see, I had to bend that out so it's not a 90 degree anymore. That's because it wasn't fitting flushly, which is a new word, flushly, against the tank to hold the tube in place. So I had to bend that so once it was bolted in place, it would hold everything nice and flush the way it's supposed to be. I wish I had showed you this before I got the tank installed, but what you can see here is where the tank edge used to be folded upward. That lip used to be folded up. Before you install the tank, you have to flatten that out. That's on the leading edge of the tank towards the nose of the car. Flatten that out so that the tank will properly fit up inside the chassis. Okay, the book shows us using a jack to jack the tank up into place, but seeing as I have Gary there helping me, I'm just going to lay it out on the ground and hut it up in place, and Gary's going to hand me the bolts, and we're going to go ahead and secure it. Nothing cosmic here. Remember, don't over-tighten it because you're just crushing your tank. And then once you get the nuts and bolts on the front secure, go ahead and tighten up the straps in the back that you left loose earlier. And there she is, all installed and ready to go, waiting for the next step, which will be fuel lines. So join us on the next one where we do fuel lines and brake lines. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, honey,
Yeah.
if something were to happen to you and I had to sell the car, do I sell it for what you said it costs?
You could do that. It'd sell real quick.